Hey everyone, ready to dive into another awesome story? Before we start, make sure to leave a like below and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any updates coming your way. And don't forget to comment on which stories you want to see here. Let's get to the story. Kang Jin-hyuk, a gaming streamer and content creator, is the only person who managed to complete the game Tower of Trials. However, as the game's popularity fades, it becomes increasingly difficult for him to make a living as a content creator. Jin-hyuk prepares to end his 11-year relationship with the game and say goodbye to his modest group of subscribers. But on that very same day, the Tower of Trials appears in reality with a message stating that humanity will be exterminated unless all players complete each floor within 90 days. Jin-hyuk, who knows the game better than anyone, decides to use his knowledge to his advantage and conquer the tower. It's time to show everyone what a hardcore gamer can do. The premise is engaging, blending the cliché of the pro gamer who becomes the protagonist in the real world with an urgent global threat. Jin-hyuk, being the only master of the game, gains a significant edge, but the tension arises from other players adapting and the challenge of each floor. The contrast between his initial desperation and his rise as a key player creates an interesting arc. Since it's well executed, the story offers both intense action and strategic moments that showcase the protagonist's genius. 315,850 victims, 79 attempts. These are the numbers and results of humanity's attempts to conquer the Tower of Trials. Humanity was in panic with the ticking clock that claimed to be the countdown to humanity's destruction. However, a new challenger appears to try to reverse the situation, giving people a glimmer of hope again. A mysterious man enters floor 48 of the Tower of Trials to challenge the Red Dragon Destia. The dragon speaks to this human, claiming that his race never knew when to surrender and questions why he came there even though many of his friends are dead. The protagonist responds that he had some things to resolve before making grilled lizard, and by luck he managed to do so in time. The dragon, hearing this, declares that his death will be more agonizing than the others who came before him. And then he charges at the protagonist. Now the fight begins. The dragon's special attack involves summoning chains that trapped him to the ground to be stomped alive. However, his plan fails as the protagonist manages to dodge. The protagonist, after dodging, tells the dragon that he could see what he was about to do just by looking at his hands. The dragon questions how he can see his ability in such a short time and compliments him as an impressive human, but claims that, unfortunately, he had only been chosen to have a more painful death. He then unleashes a blast of flames in his direction. The protagonist dodges once again and charges toward the dragon with his dagger, successfully piercing the dragon's eye, which provokes the dragon's fury. A good reason to get angry. As the dragon prepares for another barrage of fire attacks, the protagonist invokes his powers using a system called World's Memory, and with it, he summons Hellfire and Black Tears. The dragon, hearing these names, questions whether he was so confident just because of such pathetic abilities, claiming that he wouldn't be able to kill him with that. The protagonist responds that, indeed, it would be impossible to kill him with those abilities, so to do so, he would create a new one. He then fuses the two abilities he invoked. With this fusion, he manages to summon one of the ancient dragons, Etherian. Upon doing so, the dragon questions how a mere human could have such an ability and asks who he was. The protagonist responds that his name is Kang Jin-hyuk. A trash game is an expression used to refer to a game that is boring, unbalanced, poorly managed, or ridiculously difficult, and an example of this expression would be a virtual reality game called Tower of Trials. When this game was launched, hardcore players who enjoyed trolling the developers tried to conquer this game at the same time. They played for 365 days straight without eating or sleeping, trying to beat the game by any means. 3 years later, these people realized that this game was unbeatable. At least they realized it after a little while, right? Several factors contributed to the game being considered so difficult, such as an almost invincible gatekeeper, polar regions where the temperature dropped to minus 60 degrees Celsius and people froze to death in less than an hour, and a maze that expanded for 10,000 kilometers. This game wasn't made to be fun. It was developed to torture people who wanted to play it. Not long after its launch, the game started to fall from its peak, almost being abandoned. However, a few hardcore players remained, and the protagonist became the first person to complete the Tower of Trials. It was a bit fun. He found a way to conquer the original paths to finish the tower and repeated the levels infinitely until he memorized every aspect. It was fun enough for him to dedicate 11 years of his life to playing it, basically an unpaid profession. When the protagonist finally completed the last level, he wondered if he should have shown it to others in the form of a live stream or posted a video on a platform. When he tried to do something, he received a letter from the game system thanking him for being the most valuable player and notifying him that an update was scheduled to happen in 12 hours. It asked him to continue enjoying the game after the update. Kang was surprised by the new update and wondered where the company had gotten the money to do something like this, as it didn't make sense for a company that couldn't make a profit to have the necessary investment. But regardless of whether they did the update or not, he had no plans to play this game again. The protagonist takes off his virtual reality helmet and stops to think about quitting his job as a streamer and content creator. He doesn't have family support, but he's already 27 years old, and because of that, he won't be able to keep supporting himself with just 500,000 won per month, about $500, forever. People used to tell him that he had enough talent to become a professional fighter, but making money is more important than practicing sports at this point. A little later, while he was live streaming, he told his viewers that he had something to say. However, upon seeing the large number of curious people, he backed out, saying he was just joking, and thought to himself that he would make the announcement the next day through a post on the internet. Classic marketing method. The next day, the protagonist wakes up complaining of a severe headache, but still needed to upload the video he recorded while playing Tower of Trials. When he turns on his computer to see how things were going, he is faced with a broadcast claiming that the Tower of Trials appeared in real life and it wasn't a joke. When the protagonist enters the broadcast to check if it was true, he finds a group of people watching the tower, which seemed to be in the center of his city. It was then that he received the notification that the previously planned update had been completed, and another notification appeared saying that all players had to finish every floor of the tower in 90 days. Everyone that received additional messages claiming that if they failed, humanity would perish. When the protagonist realizes that everything happening was true, he knows he can't waste time and must hurry to get there to find a specific item he will need. The current world might be heading toward its end, but for some reason, his heart was excited about this. In the city center, people were complaining about buses not showing up at the right time, and most wanted to leave Korea and go somewhere else to escape the tower. Some argue they needed to leave the country to stay alive. However, one of them questioned this decision, claiming that the tower had appeared all around the world. The protagonist rushes past these people, completely ignoring them, and approaches a staircase leading to the underground shopping center. This area where he was now in the Korean server is one of the outer regions with a total of 30 scattered around the country, and this was the closest one to him. When he descends, the system announces that he has entered an event area. When he notices there are more people there with him, probably all the Tower of Trials players. A familiar voice calls for the protagonist, who is facing away at the moment. The person recognizes him and quickly says they thought you would be locked in his room playing the game. This person who called him is Lee Jong-soo, another content creator with 500,000 followers and at the same time a representative of the company the protagonist works for, the infamous Playboy. When Kang recognizes him, he asks why Lee isn't recording anything at the moment. Lee responds that under such circumstances, there would be no way to do so, and asks the protagonist what the highest floor he's reached is, since he played the game like a maniac, and tells him not to keep secrets from his colleague. However, the protagonist doesn't consider him a colleague at all. On the contrary, this guy manipulates other content creators into signing unfair contracts, and the more content they make, the more in debt they become to him. Their protests are suppressed by the laws of the company, and all his colleagues who started creating content with him were abandoned one by one. Lee touches the protagonist's shoulder, claiming he knew he was good at the game, and that if he helped him, he could get better terms in his contract. He asks the protagonist what he thinks of this proposal. However, this time the world had changed, and the protagonist tells Lee to stop talking to him and headbutts him in the mouth, knocking out 2 teeth and making his mouth bleed a lot. What a headbutt. Then, a tree appears in the middle of everyone, containing 4 special fruits which were considered extremely important to consume as they would greatly increase the user's attributes. Everyone rushed frantically toward the fruits. Lee tells the protagonist that if they had worked together, they could have shared the fruit, but now they were late. The protagonist responds that if Lee didn't know anything, he should just stay quiet, saying it wasn't the time yet. When all the fruits were consumed, the protagonist remembers that most people didn't even know these fruits existed, and those who played the game only a few times would focus solely on eating the fruit. More hardcore players enjoyed the cruelest mode that would follow. When the tree's fruits were consumed, it began attacking the players, and while they fled from the location, the protagonist stood still. When he sees Lee apparently scared, he asks if he is going to give up. Lee responds that he refuses to die there for no reason. The protagonist replies that it's a shame since the real reward of this event could only be obtained once all the fruits were eaten. Lee is a bit confused about what's happening, but finally understands, as he had been questioning why he hadn't gone after the fruits, and now he discovered why. Something was definitely going wrong at that place, that much he was sure of. He continues asking the protagonist what they should do if he was telling the truth. The protagonist responds that they need to get closer, and if they move one by one, they'll be easy targets. So they'll have to advance from opposite sides at the same time. But if either of them gets caught, it's over, and so they put the plan into action. to hurry it up, right? When the protagonist gets closer to the tree, it begins attacking him instantly, but he quickly notices that Lee stayed behind. When he asks why, Lee responds that he would never listen to someone like him. The protagonist is happy with the situation since his bad personality hadn't changed at all. In the end, the protagonist was just using him as a target for the tree, and that's exactly what happened. While Lee was distracted, the tree's branches completely wrapped around him and he started panicking, asking the protagonist for help. The protagonist responds that there's no reason to do that and continues advancing toward the tree. Lee begins crying, saying he doesn't want to die like this, but soon he's crushed alive by the branches wrapped around him. The protagonist is now facing the tree, easily dodging all of its attacks since he had memorized all its patterns. He manages to get the tree's branches to attack his own main trunk, causing a special heart-shaped fruit to appear. He then picks up a sharp branch from the ground and suggests they finish it off. What a lethal weapon. This tree is just a simple event, so he won't gain any experience points from this. The tree launches another barrage of attacks for the protagonist, but he dodges all of them effortlessly. While dodging the attacks and approaching its trunk, the tree launches a special attack composed of special butterflies that release a sleep powder. However, this attack is easy to avoid, you just need to hold your breath while passing through them. The protagonist finally reaches the fruit and penetrates it with a sharp branch he found on the ground, destroying the tree completely. The protagonist sticks his arm into the tree's central crack, and when he pulls it out, he reveals a green pearl, which is called the tree essence. Each fruit that grows on this tree gives a bonus of 3 points to a random attribute, but this essence offers the person who consumes it a bonus of 12 points to apply to any attribute the user chooses. Kang was now as strong as a level 1 player could possibly be. An hour later, a video of his battle against the tree was posted on social media. Since he hadn't selected a name for his character, his face was censored and his voice altered. Most of the comments were expressing surprise at the protagonist's achievement of defeating the tree completely alone. Among all these comments with the same opinion, some people were offering him money. The protagonist didn't understand what was so surprising about it, since even though defeating the tree at level 1 was difficult, it wasn't something people should be that surprised about. But he could probably understand since most players hadn't even gotten halfway through the game. However, an offer of 1 billion won still caught his attention. It caught mine too, who wouldn't it catch? The protagonist had lived a difficult life where he could only earn money to survive, and many times he couldn't pay the bills. There were days when he had to go hungry to save food. If he had received this offer the previous day, he would have accepted it without hesitation. But at this moment, he wouldn't reveal everything he knew for just 1 billion or even 10 billion won. The most important thing now was the monopoly on information. The protagonist's next destination was already decided. The moment the game was updated, many things from the Tower of Trials had been released across Korea. At first, this had no significant effect as it didn't make much of a difference, but real-world artifacts had turned into relics. These weren't real relics, as only the legendary relics had power inside the tower, and those outside were replicas, meaning copied versions. The protagonist, now in the National Museum of Korea, is able to find many of these replicas. He was in the research zone now. The National Museum of Korea holds many artifacts, ranging from different types. The only problem he had now was that he wouldn't be the only one searching for the replicas. Unlike that tree that appeared in various locations across the city, there was only one museum here. The protagonist bets that many people from across the country have already gone to search for relics in this place, and there were definitely long-time players among them. When the protagonist enters the museum, he sees something he had already expected. One of the guards had been incinerated alive. Someone had arrived before him at the location, and now he had to hurry. The protagonist already knew that people would change, as the world had also changed. However, he didn't expect things to get so wild in just one day. He bets that most people were searching for these replicas in the modern and medieval areas of the museum, and there was one relic everyone wanted, the Grand Map. Of course, no one wanted it just because it was a map of Korea. Everyone wanted this ancient map because it contained information about the Tower of Trials. It showed where the labyrinths and ruins were, as well as the types of items and monsters that were in those areas. It only covered up to the 10th level, but that was more than enough for people's hearts to desire. In the ancient relics room, chaos was happening. Many people were attacking and killing each other to try to get their hands on the relics. This whole fight was interrupted when someone shouted for everyone to stop. The people fighting looked and saw a man with a tattoo on his neck, warning them that the next person to move would be killed. One of the people who had been fighting responded that no one there was afraid of his threats, and that, in fact, if he moved, his skull would be cracked open. The mysterious man claimed that he knew words wouldn't be enough to stop them, so he strengthened his arms, fortifying them with iron around him. When he charged for the person who had threatened him earlier, he was interrupted by a mysterious old man who appeared and said that the map wouldn't be theirs. The man, while threatening him, was responded to with a fire spell launched in his direction by the old man, incinerating him alive. A reaction that was expected, let's say. As the protagonist passed by the corpse of the man, the elderly man commented that his arrogance had been his downfall. A girl appeared behind him, saying that the fire magic was indeed very strong and she was grateful to be on his side. The old man asked her if she had managed to get the item she wanted, and she confirmed, saying that all she needed was a small statue, which she had placed in her bag. When she took it out, it was revealed to be an Anubis amulet. As she touched it, she claimed that it would be responsible for taking care of anyone who crossed their path. Then the small statue, surrounded by black magic, transformed into a large representation of the ancient god Anubis. She claimed that anyone who moved from now on would be considered her enemy, saying that she would make her new friend tear the head off anyone who opposed her. The people present there were frustrated with what was happening and began to question why there were so many experienced players in that place. They quickly started leaving to avoid causing trouble. The protagonist appeared, walking through them toward the girl, saying that she had caused a great mess in that place, and asking if the people there had no respect for historical artifacts. He then took the map for himself and thanked her for it being intact. The girl called his attention and asked if he thought she was joking, then ordered Anubis to advance toward him, set the pitbull after the poor guy. The protagonist easily dodged the attack, taking the spear out of his hand. The people around were surprised by how easily he managed to avoid such a powerful attack. Kang understood that the people's lack of understanding was normal, considering they knew nothing about him. The protagonist asked the girl what she planned to do now that her puppy's weapon was gone. She opened her backpack, claiming that she didn't just have one of those small statues with her, and then summoned an army of Anubis. When Kang realized she had summoned 5 of them at once, he noticed that she wasn't a regular player like the others there. The same applied to the old man who had used fire magic earlier. There were more experienced players at that location than he had expected. The protagonist responded that what she had just done was pretty cool. She asked him why he said that, and he replied that it was somewhere between impressive and mediocre, to be more precise. When she heard that, she got angry, claiming that he was very arrogant. The protagonist asked if she really thought so, adding that he would have to give her an appropriate demonstration. To serve as an example, right? He then pulled one of the maps he had kept in his backpack, determined to show her the stark difference in their levels. From one of the maps came a giant tiger. This map was a replica of a relic called the Pine Tree and the Tiger. Upon seeing the colossal size of the monster, the girl was shocked, and the protagonist, in front of a 5-meter-tall tiger, simply petted its ear and told it to devour all the Anubis. The tiger charged toward his opponents, easily defeating them all. Its strength was so colossal and its speed so unnatural that it defeated all 5 in a short span of seconds. The girl was questioning how this was possible. She had heard that there were many uses for these relics, but had never heard of anything like this. The magical energy emanating from the tiger was enough to make her tremble. She then fell to her knees, claiming that she had lost. She added to her thought, saying she had been sure she was unbeatable at that moment, but this guy in front of her was beyond normal. The protagonist approached her, asking her to give him something she had taken earlier. She asked what it was, and he replied that he wanted the Tutankhamun mask. The girl asked why he wanted it, since the mask was useless in Korea, and he looked at her and called the tiger closer, prompting her to throw the backpack at him. Soon, the mask was revealed to him. Also, with that kind of motivation, who wouldn't throw the backpack? Kang was happy, as he had now acquired the second relic he needed. The girl noticed this and asked about the map. He had forgotten about that detail, but replied that it was none of her business. He then ordered his tiger to stand guard to make sure no one followed him. Now everything was ready for him to go after the best skill in the Tower of Trials. On the upper floor, the protagonist was accompanied by an old man, was questioning how the boy had managed to get there and how he had passed the girl with the statues earlier. The protagonist commented to the old man that they were facing a star barrier. The old man responded that it seemed like the boy really knew what he was doing. One of those barriers during his game, the old man said both physical and magical attacks were useless against her. In response, Kang stuck his hand inside the barrier and saw a word, telling the old man that now he knew how to deactivate the barrier. But there was one condition. To weaken the barrier, the old man would have to constantly use his fire magic on it. The old man asked how long he would need to keep using his magic, and the protagonist replied that it would be until he went inside, took all the necessary relics, and came out. The old man questioned the protagonist about him staying outside while the boy took everything on the other side of the barrier. The protagonist explained that he hadn't been able to use any powerful offensive spells to weaken the barrier and knew it was hard to believe, but this was the only way for them to get the relics. Soon it would be morning and they couldn't leave empty-handed. He added that he would let the old man keep the map since there was something else he needed there, at least theoretically. The old man asked the protagonist if he promised to deliver the map. Kang confirms, stating that he didn't want to make an enemy out of someone who used such powerful magic like him. When the old man heard this, he realized that no matter how many doubts he had about the boy, he now had no other choice but to believe him. The old man finally accepted the offer, saying he would trust him, and then launched his fire magic full force at the barrier. The protagonist managed to pass through it, and the old man urged him to hurry. Kang confirmed, and as he began walking on the other side of the barrier, he noticed that unlike the lower floors, the place he was in now seemed untouched. The protagonist began his search for the relic he desired, and then found a necklace from a very ancient era. This was the last artifact needed to create the strongest skill in the Tower of Trials. He then gathered all the relics and combined them to create the skill. The gang system notified the protagonist that he had successfully obtained all the necessary relics for the creation. When the process finished, another message appeared, stating that he had acquired a relic called the Eye of Truth, which had the highest classification. With this eye, he was able to see other players' information and determine whether they were telling the truth or lying. He could use this 3 times a day. Quite a deal, huh? The Eye of Truth was one of the 5 greatest relics in the world, but there was another reason the protagonist had gone to the museum that day. Then he received another message from the game saying that he had successfully combined 3 replicas to form a superior one, meeting the necessary requirements. Kang began to float and said that now he could copy and save countless skills from around the world and combine them to create even stronger abilities. This was his weapon to become the strongest in the Tower of Trials. Finally, the system notified him that he had acquired a unique skill called Fusion. This skill allowed him, when completing special missions, to copy other people's abilities and store them in the memories of the world. These stored abilities, when combined, would enable the creation of more advanced and powerful abilities. The old man warned the protagonist to hurry and leave soon because he wouldn't be able to maintain the fire magic much longer. The protagonist then used his Eye of Truth to see some details about the old man. His ability allowed him to see that the old man was hiding his true emotions behind a mask. Kang, upon seeing this, realized that he could likely be deceived by the old man and decided to outsmart him. Outfox the trickster. The old man again urged him to hurry, and the protagonist replied that he could stop using that ability now. He sincerely said that in the first place he didn't even need to use that magic. Upon hearing this, the old man stopped using his power and asked what he meant by that. Kang recited the word he had seen earlier when he came into contact with the barrier, Carpo. And upon uttering this word, the barrier disintegrated. The protagonist was now facing the map, claiming that he already knew this tower like the palm of his hand, and this item was useless to him. But he couldn't just hand it over to anyone. Kang took a letter out of his pocket, and when the old man saw this, he panicked, asking what he was going to do. The protagonist reminded him that he had said earlier that he didn't need the map and then set it on fire. With this map, anyone could uncover hidden things up to the 10th level of the tower, which would put the protagonist's advantage at risk. In this case, the best thing to do was deal with the problem right away. The old man was extremely angry, claiming that he was going to end Kang's life. Kang used his ability to copy skills and took control of the old man's fire magic for himself, manipulating it in his hands. The old man was impressed, saying the protagonist really wasn't normal, and that someone like him probably didn't need the map. Before being attacked by the protagonist, Kang told the old man that if he wanted to scale the tower more easily, he should listen to what he had to say calmly. Cue the father's call. Leaving the museum, the protagonist commented that only 4 high-level players had visited the place, including him. Now that the Tower of Trials had become a reality, he understood the desire to reduce risks. He needed to acquire as many skills as possible. He had previously told the old man that he would contact him later, saying that while he waited, he would level up along with that girl. With that, he managed to get 2 pawns he could use in the future, but there was still a long way to go. He needed to prioritize and collect the skills he wanted. While he was thinking this, he soon realized that he was starving and had reached his limit. For such an occasion, nothing was better than a bowl of hot soup. He then headed to a restaurant that sold the type of soup he was looking for. The people inside were attentively watching the television, which was showing news about the incident at the National Museum of Korea, where 23 people were dead and more than 50 people were injured. Similar incidents were happening not just in Korea, but all around the world. When Kang heard this news, he realized that his previous thought about players from other countries preparing for the tower was correct. The reporter continued with the coverage, showing footage from a security camera in which the protagonist was fighting against that girl, but his face was censored. The people in the diner observed that it was the same person from the leaked video fighting a giant tree. Good thing the video wasn't inappropriate. The news report continued, stating that the government was investigating the mysterious structure of the Tower of Trials and had created a special department called the Association of the Awakened, which consisted of civilians who had gained special powers. When the protagonist heard this, he realized that the government was responding faster to the issue than he had expected. Seeing that they had established a department with people who had awakened unique abilities, they had probably already accepted this new change, which was a surprise because he had thought it would take at least a few weeks. The reporter then invited the head of the Association of the Awakened to present himself. Han Sangjin introduced himself, saying that he was there to recruit the awakened people and promised a minimum salary of 60 million won and various benefits. Han demonstrated that he was doing everything possible to find the powerful anonymous person who appeared in the videos. The protagonist quickly realized that he was referring to him and asked if they really thought he could be bought. No matter how much they offered, he had no intention of joining any group. A highly skilled player was more valuable than hundreds of normal players, and Han knew this too, which was probably why he was looking for the protagonist. The next day, the tower finally opened for people to enter, and the protagonist was surrounded by a crowd of players. They all seemed like newcomers. The game system informed the players that to celebrate their entry into the tower, they would be given 100 coins. These coins were the currency used in the tower, and players could upload videos of their personal achievements and receive 100 coins for every 10,000 views. This is pretty similar to YouTube monetization. Basically, this video system was the point that connected the awakened people inside the tower with the regular people outside of it. Views increased with the quality of the video and especially with the player's level in the tower. This system was the most interesting part of the Tower of Trials. The more popular you became, the more coins you could earn. The players started running toward the tower, saying they had to go to the Goblin Cave first, claiming it would be the perfect place to farm. Some said they would make a lot of money and have fun. The protagonist, while watching them all run, noticed that they were all in a hurry. Everyone wanted to finish this tower and get ahead of everyone else. Earning coins should be easy for the protagonist since he knew everything about this tower, but he wasn't planning to make videos. Giving away all the knowledge he had for just a few coins wasn't worth it. While everyone was running, he decided he would take the less crowded path first, all meticulously planned. There was a time when he had just started the 30th floor of the tower and felt like he couldn't progress past that point. He was scouring all the lower floors to find something that would help him level up. This meant that occasionally he retraced his steps. In the end, he found the answer he needed in a ruin, and that's when he realized his character had been damaged from the start. He realized that the character he had spent years perfecting was a disaster. He then decided to delete that character and create a new one, even though it was difficult, and swore to himself that next time he would reach the top. This was about 6 years ago. The protagonist was now facing a place called the Labyrinth, which had been designed by Daedalus and was known for its extremely complicated paths and a wide variety of traps. To reach level 30 right away, he needed a solid foundation, and the key to building that was right there in the labyrinth. The protagonist didn't expect to have to go through this again. He wasn't too happy about it, but still felt a bit nostalgic, so he entered the labyrinth. To kill the nostalgia quickly. Inside the labyrinth, everything was the same as before, even the smell. However, he wasn't alone. There were some people who had arrived after him. One of them introduced themselves, saying they were looking for a place to farm, and the door to the labyrinth was open, so they entered before it closed. It was revealed that just before the protagonist opened the door, these people had been hiding behind a tree, watching him. They had followed him because they were curious, and it seemed like the right choice since he opened the huge door without a key. They thought he was a newbie, and since the newbie could open the door so easily, it should be a hard place to progress through. One of the people in the group asked if he would share any items he found without a fight. The girl who introduced herself to him said he wouldn't do that, so they would make the labyrinth their new home forever. The girl continued talking to the protagonist, suggesting that since everyone was together there, they should form a group. She argued that being in a larger group would provide more security. The protagonist then questioned whether they were trying to take advantage of him because of the numerical difference and used the Eye of Truth to analyze the girl. Her profile showed that her name was Park Hana, and she had been on the 2nd floor of the Tower of Trials before. She had a skill that caught the protagonist's attention. This skill was called communication. When the user meets someone for the first time, they can naturally become friends with that person and can also clear someone's sense of uncertainty. One of the conditions for the protagonist to copy this skill with his Eye of Truth was to spend at least 240 hours with this girl. After these hours, no one could be between them. And then he could finally put his plan into action. Everyone who was with him started introducing themselves. One of them stepped forward and said his name was Jang Chulsik, and he had played a little before quitting the game. Another girl, named Lee Himin, had followed the same path as him. Another person introduced herself as Jang Mina, who had been on the 3rd floor before. Another was Chien Minguk, who had never played the Tower of Trials before. Tu Kwangwu was also there for the first time. The protagonist acted friendly and introduced himself to them. Park grabbed his arm and asked what the highest level he had reached in the Tower of Trials was. Realizing she was using the communication skill, he pulled away from her and responded that he had reached as far as he could. She noticed that her ability hadn't worked on him and found it strange, but continued asking him to tell her what kind of monsters were in the labyrinth. He replied that it wouldn't be that difficult since the labyrinth changes shape from time to time. When everyone became confused by what he said, the labyrinth began to change shape, causing them to lose their balance. The labyrinth was adjusting itself, shifting its structures, and the intensity of the changes left the group exhausted from dodging everything happening around them. When they checked if they were okay, one of them commented that he couldn't believe such a labyrinth existed on level 1, claiming it was crazy since everything on the first floor should be easy, except for the ruins. Park realized that this place was way too dangerous for a level 1 player, and they needed to leave immediately. She asked her friend if she could find the exit using her ability. The girl responded that when the labyrinth changed shape, her ability was deactivated, causing the group to panic since they couldn't find an exit. A perfect reason to panic. The protagonist, analyzing the situation, realized that this group had followed him, confident in the navigation ability of this girl. The group was now extremely angry and approached the protagonist, accusing him of hiding such an important piece of information at the start. They claimed the walls had nearly eaten them alive, and they almost died because of him. They also lost one of the girls during the change and blamed him as well. The protagonist took a deep breath and told them he never asked them to follow him. Park didn't understand what he was saying, so he continued, explaining that it was their decision to come here on their own, and he hadn't forced any of them to follow him. One of the guys drew his weapon, claiming he had heard enough and accepted that they would be trapped in that place forever. He had never liked the protagonist from the beginning. However, before he could do anything, an axe was thrown at him, and he lost his head. This caused a big commotion within the group, and soon a massive minotaur charged toward them. When everyone accepted that they would die there, the protagonist charged toward the minotaur and began fighting it. Are you enjoying the story so far? Then leave a like to show some support and comment what you think. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next stories that are also awesome. The minotaur attacked him with its axe, but he easily dodged it and activated one of his skills that significantly reduced the level difference against stronger enemies. When the protagonist faces a more powerful opponent, the level difference between them can be reduced by 1 level for every 3 points. After exploring various possibilities, this was the only way he found to grow stronger at level 1. The protagonist had faced the monster's attacks thousands of times, and dodging them had become almost muscle memory. This was because he was a hardcore player. The monster kept attacking him relentlessly, but the protagonist kept dodging every attack with ease. No matter how powerful the Minotaur's strikes were, they were useless since they never hit him. The group watching Kang fight the Minotaur was stunned and started questioning whether they were really trying to deceive this guy. Park began to think it was truly foolish of her to believe they could steal from and kill him, realizing she must have been out of her mind. When Kang noticed that the group of friends was trying to leave the area without a trace, he appeared behind Park and asked where they were going. Before she could respond, the Minotaur appeared again, and the protagonist told them that if they wanted some points, they should join him. The guy is smooth talking. He continued, saying that if they dodged the attacks, they could gain some secret stats, and it would be easier than it seemed. He invited them to try. However, the Minotaur interrupted the conversation by launching a powerful attack at the group. Everyone was shocked by the impact of the blow, especially since only Park and Jang managed to survive. The protagonist told them that they couldn't just stand there or worse would happen. Just then, the labyrinth began to change again, creating a massive wall between them and the Minotaur. The duo, still shocked by the deaths of their friends, asked if the Minotaur wouldn't come after them again. The protagonist replied that he had touched some glowing butterflies that released powder that attracted the Minotaur, and it would likely continue following him. The girl asked why he had done something so insane, and he answered that obviously he did it to improve his stats. When the labyrinth changed, it could restore his cooldowns and stamina, and once the Minotaur noticed, it would follow him again, allowing him to have a bit more fun. The girl asked how much longer they would have to endure this, and the protagonist replied that it would take a month to get out of the labyrinth. They both got up from the ground, claiming they would have to take different paths, stating that if they didn't follow him, the monster wouldn't chase them. Kang agreed that this was true, but asked which path they were taking since wandering around in the labyrinth without direction could be dangerous. The protagonist then revealed that he knew where the exit was, as he had mentioned earlier that he knew this labyrinth better than anyone. The girl then realized they had no option but to go together and suggested that the 3 of them go together. However, the protagonist replied that nothing in this world is free, and if they wanted a ride, they have to pay a fee. He pointed a dagger at them, demanding they hand over all their coins. The guy's a bit sly, huh? A player was fighting bravely in a cave full of goblins while broadcasting live to impress others. The group managing this player's videos was commenting that everyone was talking about in one forums, and that this battle against the goblins had generated a lot of views and paid well. You must have easily made thousands of coins just from the views. One of them commented that people probably thought he did it all by himself, and the editing they did to remove the other players was excellent. Another responded that there was no way anyone could figure out what they had done. Just then, they were surprised by a new video that surpassed theirs in views, leaving them all stunned. 10 minutes ago, the protagonist was asking the duo's attention, stating that they couldn't just stand there doing nothing and needed to work. He added that they needed materials to make beds to sleep on, and angry, they went off to gather these things. Once they left, the protagonist opened the system shop, claiming that this time he had enough coins and bought enchanted tarot cards, a bronze key fragment, a wooden wheel fragment, and a scroll of enchantment. These items might have seemed like trash that no one would buy, but the most important thing was how to use them. It works for a lot of things in real life. The protagonist combined the 3 items and obtained the Wheel of Fortune, an S-rank item that allows the user to maximize their luck for 10 minutes. He then used the wheel to obtain a large number of luck scrolls, using them all on his dagger. The game system notified him that he was the first person on the Korean server to successfully create the first max-level enchanted item, and because of this, he earned 5,000 coins. This achievement would be added to the Hall of Fame the following day. Meanwhile, the duo following the protagonist claimed that it was the 10th day they had been in hell. They made campfires from some debris they found, slept on moss beds, and all they had to eat were mushrooms and moss. The Minotaur had found them several times, and every change in the labyrinth was a life-or-death event. Then there was the protagonist who dealt with everything completely alone. Park talked to Jang, saying that she would probably die if things continued like this, and he replied that he was in the same situation. However, before entering the tower, she had anticipated things and hired some anonymous people to talk to her and gather information. But all the information they found about the protagonist turned out to be useless, which made her question why she had chosen these idiots to help her outside the tower. She became frustrated with them and asked if they had at least informed her brother of her situation. They responded that it would take 3 weeks to get her out of there. The girl commented that the best possibility they had would be to kill the protagonist and wait where they entered until her brother showed up. Only then could they leave that place alive, but the problem now was how to kill him. Jang picked up a stone, claiming that the protagonist was sleeping, and that this was probably their only chance to do it. He then moved to attack the protagonist. These people are way too sly, huh? Before he could reach the protagonist, he was interrupted by the girl, who said that the protagonist's reaction speed was beyond their capabilities, and if they fought him, they wouldn't stand a chance of winning. The moment they attacked, he would likely recover quickly and retaliate. Jang stopped and asked what she was suggesting they do, since they couldn't just stand there and let him use them. The girl questioned him about letting themselves be used and then continued, saying that her brother was in the Black Body Guild and had given her something to use when in danger. She then pulled a poison from her bag that, when used, could take down 100 trolls. She said that if they were going to try to kill the protagonist, they would have to make sure to do it with a single attempt so he wouldn't have a chance to fight back. The next day, the protagonist was complaining about his food plate, which was made of wood and consisted only of mushrooms. He was starting to feel like he was in some kind of survival show. The girl asked if there was nothing else to eat in that place, and if he wanted something else, you catch a bat. The protagonist laughed and asked her to pass the water behind her to him, and told Jang to bring more mushrooms and moss, which they did. They basically became his little helpers. When he ate the mushroom, the dude began to watch closely, waiting for the poison to take effect. However, Jang's plate fell to the ground, and a large amount of blood came from his mouth as he slowly died from the poison's effect. The protagonist called them idiots and questioned if they really thought he would eat any food they gave him. The girl asked if he knew he was already poisoned, to which the protagonist confirmed, saying that when he asked for more, he switched the plates while they were distracted. He continued, saying that what she was doing with those hired people outside the tower was against the rules. She asked him if he had any proof. He replied that such things should only be used during a boss fight before leveling up, and if players were caught manipulating visuals or cheating, measures would be taken to resolve it. Fair enough, right? The protagonist then opened the game system to report her, and the game warned that if no unsportsmanlike conduct was found, the person who reported would be penalized. He told the girl that she should have kept a more serious face while talking to those other people, and that made it very obvious to him. He added that he was disappointed with her and confirmed the report button. A red band appeared around her, and the spectators of his stream were all banned from watching videos for a month. If they were caught doing this again, they would be permanently banned. It was at that moment that, during the commotion, the Minotaur decided to appear. The girl hid behind him, asking if he would fight the monster again. He remarked that just a minute ago she had tried to poison him and questioned why he should help her. She became nervous and said that he had always helped her. The game system notified the protagonist that the conditions to copy her skill had been met, and when he saw this message, he responded to her, saying that he no longer needed her. The Minotaur launched a powerful attack with his axe in their direction. Both of them managed to dodge, and the protagonist jumped toward its head. He still couldn't kill it with his dagger and began fighting it to find another way to do so. He then used his fire magic to distract it and slashed the back of its leg with his dagger, causing it to fall to its knees. However, just before the protagonist could finish off the creature, the game system announced that he had used his skill called Berserk. What a scary name. This skill the Minotaur used restored its strength, and all its attributes were increased by 30% for 5 minutes. Its intelligence also increased momentarily, allowing it to use language. The Minotaur told the protagonist to kill him and the girl without hesitation. The protagonist noticed that his mana efficiency had also increased, so he placed the dagger back in his hands and told the Minotaur to come at him with everything it had. Kang repelled the attacks from its axe using only his dagger, making the battle more interesting. The girl, watching from a distance, was shocked that he was only repelling and wasn't trying to escape at all. The level boss, the Minotaur, had a level 10 skill activated, and even if all the members of her brother's guild came there, they wouldn't be able to defeat it. It felt like everything had stopped for the protagonist. No matter how hard he worked in real life, it seemed like he was always going in circles, never able to change his reality the way he wanted, and that made him feel weak. The difficulties of both the game and real life were very high, but in this world now, everything was working out for him correctly. He was still exchanging attacks with the Minotaur, and successfully repelling them. This time, he managed to find some openings to attack the monster. When he landed a hit, the Minotaur said it was just a scratch. The monster, about to land a punch on the protagonist, was interrupted by the game's system, which warned that his Berserk skill had exceeded its time limit. His 5 minutes were up. That was the end of the sweet moment. The creature became paralyzed, and the girl appeared behind a rock asking if it was over. The protagonist was surprised that she was still there and commented that his skill had only been deactivated for a while, and now was giving him a break. After the labyrinth changed, the monster would come after him again. There were still 20 days left to finish all of that. 20 days later, he was fighting the Minotaur again, successfully dodging all of its attacks as always, and for some reason, it seemed like the monster was getting weaker each day. This time, he managed to defeat the Minotaur with just one punch to its chin. With the monster defeated, he turned to the girl and said that all that was left was to figure out how he would deal with her. The protagonist then walked toward her, claiming that he was recruiting players for his hardcore gaming company. She didn't understand very well, and he became angry, saying that she didn't seem very excited about it, so he could assume she wasn't interested. Seeing his displeasure, she started lying, saying that she was very interested in asking him to hire her, claiming she had always wanted to work for his company. He then approached her and asked what she could do to help the company move forward. She replied that she could use her unique sociability skill, which would surely help everyone there. However, the protagonist had already copied that skill and questioned what else she had to offer. She responded that she would never betray him, and upon realizing that was all she had to offer, he walked toward her, saying that he was disappointed. She then panicked and said she would give him the Brahm ring. Poor Brahm. The girl, desperate, clung to the protagonist's knee, claiming that her brother could get the ring for her and begging him not to kill her. This ring is one of the best items a player can find in the first level. It increases agility, magical resistance, and inhibits monster magic. The protagonist then congratulated her, saying she had just been hired as the newest member of his company. He continued, saying that the company didn't provide a salary for its members, and they would have to stay by his side whenever he called, no matter when or where, even at 3 a.m. on a deserted island. But now came the most important part, signing a contract. The protagonist then combined his fire ability with the girl's social ability, which he had copied and obtained the mark of obedience. He placed his hand on her shoulder, causing her to scream in intense pain. This mark made it so that the person who was marked would obey the user without question, and if they disobeyed, they would experience excruciating pain in their body. The two of them were now leaving the labyrinth after the long period of time spent inside fighting the Minotaur. They had accumulated 5,000 coins since the game system had placed them in the Hall of Fame again. The girl was happy with the money she had earned from suffering like that, but the protagonist ordered her to give him everything she had. This left him with 10,000 coins, and she was upset. Poor girl, she really gets treated badly here. The protagonist continued, saying that he wanted her to give him the ring in 3 days. When she tried to argue about the short period, he reduced it to 2 days, making her run off to do it quickly. A news broadcast was playing in the city center, stating that in a week, the Korean guild Dangun would face the boss of the 3rd floor. This guild was number 1 in Korea, and journalists claimed that the other guilds around the world weren't doing as well as they were. So people were expecting big things from Korea. When the protagonist heard that they had taken a month to finally reach the boss of the 3rd floor, he was surprised at the rush they were in to advance quickly. But they were probably doing this to monopolize the numerous resources of the tower. Nevertheless, they were given 90 days to finish each floor. In other words, you didn't have to reach the third floor all at once. If you advanced that far without focusing on mastering each level, you would eventually hit a wall due to the differences in the levels. The next day, the protagonist returned home, stating that he needed to collect all the information he could about what happened during the month he was in the labyrinth. He needed people he could trust, something quite necessary. Kang then searched for players online and went to meet them in person at a restaurant. Upon arriving, he came across the player named Lee Taemin and the player Yu Yanhua, who were difficult to recognize since they didn't look much like their in-game characters. The protagonist then used his Truth Eye skill to check Lee's and Yu's information. The main goal was to observe their unique abilities, which seemed interesting, and the condition to copy their abilities was for the three of them to reach level 20 of the tower together. Lee approached the protagonist, saying it was his turn to introduce himself. Kang then gave his name and his username, which was a bit embarrassing, Poopy Fart. He couldn't remember why he had chosen that name 11 years ago. He went on to say that he was 27 years old and that he used to create content for Paprika TV. Lee was surprised, saying he used to watch things from that channel occasionally. The protagonist became a little tense and mentioned that he no longer made that type of content. Lee noticed he seemed nervous and told him to relax, saying that after all, they weren't total strangers since they had played together online a few times. You confirmed what Lee said, and the protagonist realized that they were friendlier than the previous people he had met. They weren't like the others who had tried to use him or bring him down. He was probably just tired of dealing with that type of person. Even though this was the first time they were meeting in person, it was completely easygoing. While talking to him, Lee asked about something the protagonist had mentioned earlier regarding being somewhere else for a month. The protagonist confirmed he had been away for that month. Lee then asked if he hadn't taken the test yet, to which the protagonist didn't know what he was talking about. In the car, his friends explained that the test had been created by the Awakens Association with the aim of reducing the number of deaths that had been happening by qualifying players who were fit to climb the tower. A rather well-structured system. Since the establishment of the Awakens Association, players with very low scores were prohibited from progressing past the second level, while those with high scores immediately received offers from the government and high-ranking guilds. However, only 3 types of people entered these tests: those who hoped to climb the tower, wishing to at least reach a minimum level, others who only wanted to judge whether the people were qualified to enter the tower, and lastly, those who wanted to show off their qualifications to the world. At the test location, the girl who had been with the protagonist in the labyrinth entered with her brother Hagen, who was well known for his guild, followed by a bulky man named Kim Kito from the Warrior Guild. He was annoyed by the presence of so many people at the test location. Hagen explained that these people were just trying their luck. Kim continued, saying he didn't have time for this, so they should move the people who were in his way, claiming he couldn't wait for hours. He added that he had walked all this way just because of him and his younger sister. It would be better if they didn't mess with him, as he knew exactly what would happen if they did. And he knew very well indeed. The security guards started pushing people aside to clear the path for the trio, but the protagonist, along with his friends, was in the middle of them. The guards tried to remove him, but he didn't move. Then Hagen appeared behind the security guard, complaining that he couldn't handle just one guy. He placed his finger on the protagonist's shoulder, extremely irritated, saying that he didn't know what the protagonist thought he was doing, but he was making a big mistake, though it wasn't too late for an apology. The people around were surprised to see the protagonist facing Hagen so furiously. Kang used his Truth Eye skill to check Hagen's special ability. Hagen became suspicious of being stared at. A system in the game informed the protagonist that, in order to copy any ability from this user, he needed to achieve maximum hostility toward him. Hagen kept poking him aggressively, questioning if he thought he could do something just because there were people watching. His younger sister arrived and, upon realizing it was the protagonist, tried to get his attention, but it was too late. Kang grabbed his older brother's finger and broke it with just his hand. Hagen became extremely angry with the protagonist and charged at him. Kang simply threw a water bottle in his face, dodged the attack, and hit him in the leg, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground. His younger sister wondered what he was doing at that location. Kim interrupted the two, and when the protagonist tried to use his Truth Eye ability on him, he couldn't. The system informed him that he had failed because the level difference between the two was too great, which indicated that he was likely above level 20. The protagonist told Kim that he didn't know the guy had a babysitter. Kim replied that he was useful, but couldn't be helped. Regarding this usefulness, the protagonist realized Kim was referring to Goryeo Ginseng and questioned him about offering resources to China. Kim was surprised that he knew about such things. Kim used his skill called Black Barrier to surround himself and the protagonist to give them privacy. The protagonist took advantage of the situation to make an offer, which involved negotiations. The guy is good at negotiating. Goryeo Ginseng is an excellent item for restoring the user's mana and histamine. However, it has an adverse effect that can be very negative. The protagonist observed that this negative effect was likely putting him and his guild in danger, but he could easily solve it with 3 items: Karashan juice, moonstone, and a mandrake sprout. He continued, saying that he wasn't sure about the others, but they were probably having trouble finding those sprouts and he would tell them where they could find them. He then asked Kim once again if he believed him now. Kim thought to himself that this information was exactly what his guild had been looking for, along with the team and the explorers, and wondered who this guy was. They then made a contract. Kim pointed a glowing dagger at the protagonist, saying that if he found out he was messing with him, things wouldn't end well and he would make him pay. The protagonist pulled out his dagger, saying that Kim was probably misunderstanding something. The one responsible for making the offers and giving chances at that location was him. He really put his foot down, didn't he? Outside, the protagonist's friends were fighting some bodyguards, and then the barrier broke and the protagonist left. His friends asked if everything was okay, but he reassured them, saying that Kim was more understanding than he expected. Hagen, upon noticing that Kim was leaving, questioned if he would let the protagonist leave like that, and then said that if given another chance, he would fight with everything he had, but he was interrupted by Kim grabbing his neck. Kim told him that he wasn't a worthy opponent for the protagonist, and the next time he acted on his own like that, he would regret it. He then threw him to the ground and left. Hagen wondered what had happened inside that barrier and didn't like being humiliated like that. However, the protagonist finally managed to copy his ability and left the location. The protagonist heads toward the testing location where he was called, and upon arriving, he notices a scoreboard displaying the highest scores achieved by people who passed. The examiner then calls for the next person and Kang enters. The examiner explains that the test is simple. He just needs to hit the magic crystal in front of him. And it doesn't matter which items or unique abilities he uses. They will only measure his potential when he strikes the crystal. A pretty precise test. The examiner observes that the protagonist is holding an attack and questions him about using another ability together. However, the protagonist refuses, stating that this will be enough. The examiner says he can start whenever he wants, but Kang moves toward a larger crystal near the test crystal. The examiner says that the larger crystal is an intermediate one and that he should use the beginner crystal next to him, claiming there's no way a normal person could damage an intermediate crystal like that. He's interrupted when the protagonist uses all of his strength to strike the crystal, shattering the precious intermediate crystal in half like a piece of paper. The examiner is surprised, stating that most people get disqualified because they can't produce enough mana for the crystals, but he had never heard of someone breaking such a crystal so easily. The protagonist's final score is so high that he achieves an S rank. The examiner gets excited and says he needs to report this to his superiors and asks the protagonist to wait a bit. The protagonist interrupts him, asking him to wait a week before reporting it. The examiner is confused and asks why. Kang responds that it's for personal reasons and that he doesn't care what the examiner thinks. He continues, saying that there were few things he learned in life, and one of them was that the fists closest to him were scarier than the law itself. Leaving the testing area, he meets Park, who gives him the ring he asked for, the Rahan ring. The girl says she has fulfilled her part of the deal, and now he needs to remove the mark from his shoulder. However, the protagonist ignores her and walks away. Completely Sigma behavior from the guy here. When he meets his friends, he lies to them, saying he got a rank F, which surprises them as they thought he would be stronger than them. The protagonist then explains that it's only temporary and that he agreed to try again next week. Until then, he'll have to stick with this low rank, thus persuading them. Yu warns him that the second test is to finish a dungeon and asks what he plans to do. He replies that he needs to take care of some things and asks them not to worry and just head toward the tower, promising he'll get in touch as soon as possible. The first phase of the tests measures his power and magic, and those who pass the first phase are automatically sent to the second. It's also quite easy. All that needs to be done is to finish a dungeon in the trial towers. Since the floor level doesn't matter, people usually choose ones with the weaker monsters like goblins or ogres. Regardless, he is heading for the only ruin on the first floor, a place that no one can finish alone. Since the first versions of the trial towers came out 11 years ago, it has become a reality. These ruins he is heading to are not accessible to rank F players, and since he lied about his rank, the guild controlling the ruins won't let him go alone. His only option was to become the baggage carrier for another team. As he heads toward the ruins, another baggage carrier talks to him, asking why he's there. The protagonist lies, saying that he needs a lot of money to maintain his lifestyle. The other carrier responds that it makes sense, explaining that he's there because he needs to feed and take care of his wife and kids. Upon hearing this, the protagonist realizes that everyone who says this tends to die early in the story. A sad truth in most stories. The protagonist's colleague continues, saying that people to their level need to be very careful because a single wrong move could cost them their lives. The electronic devices don't work in the area, so ambulances won't be able to get there. The protagonist reassures him, saying there's no need to worry, claiming that at the very least, everyone will be able to leave alive and go home. The colleague doesn't fully understand what he means by leaving alive, but thanks him for his words, saying he's very different from the young people of today. When the protagonist enters the ruins, he receives a message in the game system offering a new mission of difficulty S. The description says he must defeat the boss of the ruins and take his throne. The reward for completing it is that he can choose a relic, but if he fails to kill the boss, his options will be limited. The baggage carriers are happy to have arrived and are now resting until the combat team shows up. The protagonist receives a special reward for being the first person to conquer the tower. He doesn't understand why the game sent this now and wonders if he's the only one who received this reward. The chest then opens in his system, and he gets several attribute enhancements. His luck and adaptability both rise by 10 points each. With this, he gains an ability called Frozen Heart. Just like my ex, wow, that's awesome. This Frozen Heart ability allows him to maintain his composure in intense situations, making his human emotions less effective. His passive skill Monopoly is also activated. This ability claims that if he takes the last reward without sharing it with the other players, he will receive the best available reward. For the protagonist, this reward from the game system is completely insane. He's then interrupted by the arrival of the attack team, who teleports to the location where they were. One of them steps forward, stating that they are going to start moving again and have now organized their formation along with the advanced team. The protagonist uses his Eye of Truth ability on the leader to analyze his skills. To copy his abilities, the system's condition is that he must gain his loyalty during this mission, which frustrates him a bit, as it seems quite difficult to achieve. Now everyone is inside the ruins, and the mage from the attack team illuminates the path for everyone with his magical staff. When the light reveals itself in the darkness, many corpses appear. The people are surprised to realize that the bodies are actually of monsters defeated by the advanced team, and the ambience there is truly terrifying. They then encounter the advanced team, who are calling them over. The protagonist, when observing the situation, notices that something strange is happening. None of the members of this large group have a single injury after fighting all those monsters, and based on the leader's status that he observed earlier, there's no way an advanced team could handle that many monsters so easily. Something's not right here. His colleague taps him on the shoulder, asking why he's standing still and hurrying him to grab the equipment. This makes him question why he's doing this, and then remembers that he's also a baggage carrier. His colleague says they will take care of their own team, and he will be responsible for the equipment of the outsiders who are with them. The protagonist then turns to look at the outsiders and notices that one of them has a familiar symbol on their shoulder. This symbol is from a small guild composed of elite members, and this person has very expensive equipment and tries to befriend him. He approaches a knight, offering him a mug of cold water, claiming he did a good job. The knight thanks him, and the protagonist activates the ability he had stolen from the girl earlier in the labyrinth communication. When the knight removes their helmet, it's revealed to actually be a girl. She is the youngest daughter of the Lorenzia family, a noble family from Europe. She is a powerful player with divine powers, excellent attacks, defenses, and healing abilities. She is the heroine who saved Amsterdam from becoming a wasteland due to a calamity in which monsters appeared in the tower there. She is the most famous player in all of Europe, known by the title the Saint of Amsterdam, Teresa of Lorenzia. The protagonist tries to use his Eye of Truth ability on her, but the system notifies him that he failed again, claiming the ability was cancelled due to the vast level difference between them. However, this time, since his luck and adaptability attributes had increased, he managed to combine both and cancel out the level difference. This increased the Eye of Truth ability's level, and he was finally able to see her skills. The condition for him to copy one of her unique abilities would be to rescue her from a life-or-death situation, as she is among the top 100 players in the world. She's way too strong. The girl thanks the protagonist for the water he gave her earlier, but she's actually the one who's most grateful in this situation since he managed to get a chance to copy the unique ability Star Blessing. This ability is considered the best among the Holy Knights, but the problem now was how he would save her from a dangerous situation. It was then that something nearby made the teams nervous. The people who were guarding the Guardian there had been defeated, and they were very late. An eye revealed itself above them, and the system notified them that it was the Guardian of the Ruins, observing the intruders. The security system protecting that ruin was a dormant bomb that activates every time it is stimulated from the outside, and once activated, it summons a Guardian to protect the dungeon. The leader of the attack team begins to get nervous about the situation, questioning who the idiot was that planned something like this. It was already too late. They had less than 10 minutes left, and fighting a Guardian with just the people present would be suicide. At least half of them would die in that battle. If they could calmly evacuate the non-combatants in the next 10 minutes, however, his mind quickly rejects this idea, questioning why he should give up even before starting, claiming he had worked hard to become the leader of an attack team and couldn't let it end like this. He then tells his teammates to keep going. Move forward so we don't fall with our teeth. One of the members of the attack team questions this decision, stating that the team responsible for the rear hadn't even arrived yet, and they would be attacked by guardians from all sides. The leader tells him to shut up and just follow, claiming he would take full responsibility for the situation, saying they could still win without a rear guard, as they still had Teresa with them. The soldier turns to his teammates, telling them that the guardians had awakened. One of them, sitting, asks why he's so worried, claiming there's no way the leader would put them there without a plan to deal with the situation. An archer adds that solo players like them only needed to listen to the leader of the attack team. However, his speech is interrupted when a giant knight's hand crushes him alive in front of his teammates. The room they were in was soon surrounded by giant knights. The guardians have finally awakened. Now things are about to get crazy. The leader of the attack team prepared his knights and warriors for the battle ahead, stating that the guardians had awakened. Now they were all organized to fight against the massive horde of giant knights. During the battle against these knights, the leader soon showed to be quite ineffective while leading such a large group. Most of them considered themselves dead in the situation they were in. When they cried for help, Teresa threw herself towards the knights, destroying them one by one. The baggage team was completely wiped out by the giant knights, and only the protagonist's colleague remained, claiming he was facing death when a knight stood in front of him. However, the protagonist asks what he's talking about and kills the knight in front of him, continuing to say that he had previously mentioned they would leave alive. His colleague tells him to watch his back, and the knight's hand comes flying towards him, but he successfully dodges it and uses his fire magic skill to finish the job, killing the knight. He made a BBQ rich in iron, apparently. While he was talking to his colleague, Teresa pulled him out of harm's way and told the protagonist that she believed he was a good person and couldn't believe he was fighting against a baggage handler using a dagger. She accuses him of being the one responsible for awakening the guardians and finishes by saying she would make him pay for it. And that was today's story. Did you like it? Then make sure to leave a like, comment below which stories you want to see next. I'm always keeping an eye on the comments and the best stories I'm bringing to you. So that's it. Don't forget to subscribe, share it with your friends who also enjoy manhwas, and see you in the next video. We're together.